Today we are talking with Connor Hedge. Connor is a mastering engineer, producer, multi-instrumentalist, and touring musician from Salem, Oregon. He developed as a musician in Seattle, Washington before moving to LA, where he worked alongside Becker at Becker Mastering. There he honed his craft while contributing to multi-Grammy-nominated and platinum-selling records, including Doja Cat's Planet Her, Snoh Aalegra's Temporary Highs in the Violet Skies, and Joji's Glimpse of Us. Over the course of his career, Connor has earned more than 500 credits on major and independent releases. Alongside his studio work, Connor is an active touring musician with Citizens. As a studio musician and producer, he has worked across pop, rock, and hip-hop, and collaborated with artists, producers, and platforms such as Splice. Whether mastering, recording guitars, or shaping sound design, Connor's focus is always on serving the artist and their vision. Welcome to the Creative Tides podcast, where expert insights flows into everyday creative spaces. We bring you conversations with leaders, innovators, and artists, making high-level ideas accessible and practical for your local context. Discover more episodes and upcoming events at www.creative-tides.com. We're glad you're here. Well, welcome to the Creative Tides podcast. Today we are talking with Connor Hedge. Connor is a mastering engineer, producer, multi-instrumentalist, and touring musician from Salem, Oregon, so close to home for us here in the Portland area. He developed as a musician in Seattle, Washington before moving to LA, where he worked alongside Becker at Becker Mastering. There he honed his craft while contributing to multi-Grammy-nominated and platinum-selling records, including Doja Cat's Planet Her, Snoh Aalegra's Temporary Highs in the Violet Skies, and Joji's Glimpse of Us. Over the course of his career, Connor has earned more than 500 credits on major and independent releases. Alongside his studio work, Connor is an active touring musician with Citizens, bringing an artist's perspective into every project. As a studio musician and producer, he has worked across pop, rock, and hip-hop, and collaborated with artists, producers, and platforms such as Splice. Whether mastering, recording guitars, or shaping sound design, Connor's focus is always on serving the artist and their vision. And then fun fact for us who have maybe attended in-person Creative Tides events, he is also the brother of Connor Hedge, who has spoken on a few of our workshops. So welcome, right. Connor. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
My sister is she's better than all those things that you just read off. She's one of my favorite people in the world. So
that is a very, very kind and very good answer as a brother.
I have to say that now that it's being recorded and people will watch this. Yeah.
She'll follow up with you if you don't. No. Yeah, well, I'm excited to talk with you about your experience. That was a lot of just like stuff. And so I would love to hear from you, like personalize that for us. Like, where did you start? How did you start? And then how did you get to where you are now?
Oof, man. Yeah, it's been a journey, but just to kind of briefly go through my life, I was very fortunate to be raised by musical parents. Mm-hmm. And really in a musical family, even my extended family, there's just a lot of either love for music or musicianship, and was around that at a very early age. And my mom she was writing songs. She was in a touring band for a while. My dad has always been musical, write songs as well. And obviously grew up playing in church, and my folks encouraged me probably when I was 3 or 4 to start playing drums, which is wild to me because I'm thinking through, like, as parents, would you want your 3-year-old to have access to a drum kit in the home, which they provided for me, which is just wild. But I'm so grateful that they did that.
These were the days before electric kits where you could
control. Oh yeah. This was full on, bang and clang all day in our small little home in Salem. And I look back on that and just like, man, what a crazy thing they did just as as parents. But
Were
like I
you like
said,
hitting pots and pans? Like, did you have kind of a knack for it that they saw and encouraged, or did they just say, "Hey, try this"?
I think they did see something at church. If I remember right, they have a story of me like after a church service when I was around that age, 3 or 4, going up to the drums on stage, and kind of they said I played a beat. I think they're, being generous by saying that. But they saw at least that I was interested in like that instrument that was up
Mhm.
on stage. So I think that might have been what maybe kicked off that idea in their heads to that I might, want to play drums. So that was kind of my first thing. And, over my childhood, I just played a lot of drums. And eventually, my dad, who was the worship leader at our church that we went to, was like, actually, it was funny enough. There was a Sunday where no drummers were available, and they were all adult guys
Mhm.
playing drums, and I was still maybe 9 at this point, 8 or 9. And my dad was like, "Hey, bud, we got no drummers today. You want to play for the adult service? The big grown up service?" And I was horrified, but I did it. And basically, from that Sunday on, I played drums almost every Sunday until I left for college, really. Um, and so that I always tell people like playing in church, regardless of kind of your background or where you come from, playing in church is like so, I don't know, I don't want to say like overlooked because I know there's a lot of musicians that come out of church, but like it's just such a valuable thing to get those reps in
Mhm.
every week, because like where else are you really getting that,
Yeah.
especially at a young age, to be able to play with other musicians and kind of learn
Mhm.
how to play with a band. And there's just so many lessons that, you kind of glean from these Sunday services where maybe as a kid, you're just thinking, oh, I'm going through the motions, I'm playing these songs. But kind of as you grow and develop in the church, you don't realize how it's actually preparing you for, maybe one day actually doing this professionally and
Mhm.
playing with a band one day and kind of knowing how these instruments work together. So looking back on that, I think that was just such a massive thing for me to
Mhm.
have access to. And I encourage people that are part of a church, like, even if they're not part of a church, sometimes I'll be like, hey, go find a church and like try to play there. Because again, it's so hard to find a place where you can um, have hours of basically getting better at your instrument every week.
Yeah.
So um, yeah, so church was a big part for me, and eventually wanted to play guitar. Again, my folks were uh, crazy enough to buy me an electric guitar and an amp, and
They just pushed you
you
towards all
know,
the noisy instruments.
yeah,
Very
which
excited for that.
I love that. I love that so much, and the older I get, the more I respect that they did that for me, and um, started to then get interested in other instruments as well. Uh, and then beyond church, it started, I was getting involved in school bands and like playing drums and jazz band at school, playing guitar, actually picked up trumpet at one point, which shout out to my dad. He's a trumpet player as well. And um, just, yeah, it just music became just an obsession very early on in my life. And it's all I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to spend the time getting better and figuring out like who was around me, whether it was in church or at school, like, hey, who's around me that's better than me that I can learn from.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of people at church and at school that I wanted to be like older guys that were,
Mhm.
you know, they could do this really cool. They could play this song, and I couldn't yet play that song.
Mhm.
And they would take, I had a few guys that I'm so grateful for to this day that took me under their wing and kind of showed me some ropes on drums and guitar and bass and instruments like that. And um, so then, moving into middle school, high school, that's when I first kind of had this idea of what if I made a band or
Mm.
started a band and wrote songs or something crazy like that. And eventually met some of my best friends um, that also played instruments and started doing the band thing, started writing songs, and eventually that led to okay, how do we record these songs
Mm.
and how do we play them live? It was kind of a challenge to figure out okay, we're in a band, but we're just playing in my garage.
Yeah.
We want to play these songs live, we want to record them. So that led into okay, now how do I learn to record? Where am I going to learn this?
Yeah. Were you
How
just
are we going to
on
figure out?
GarageBand at the time?
You know, I'm old, so I don't think GarageBand was around back then. Um, I just had like a really humble PC that could hardly ran and could hardly keep up with any sort of music production software, which at the time I think was just Audacity,
Mm.
this free like recording uh, program. I didn't really have any mics or anything like that. I think I just plugged like a SM58 direct into the PC because back then if you had an adapter, you could plug a microphone in straight into the PC, like no interface, nothing. And I think that is where I initially probably started messing around with recording stuff. And then my dad just, you know, being the guy he is, was always looking around for like, who can I connect my son with that,
Mhm.
has a studio or maybe can show him how to do this thing for real. And through my mom's band that she was in at the time, their recording engineer, my dad connected me with him. His name's Corey Noland. Shout out Corey. And he ended up recording that first band of mine when we were in middle school.
Wow.
And we got to have that experience when I think I was in seventh grade. That first real experience of like, okay, we're going to go into the studio, we're going to record our songs, and we're going to make an album basically.
Wow.
And from there, his son, Jared Noland, became a mentor of mine and recorded other bands of mine as I got older through high school. Like he was kind of our producer engineer, if you will, and um, me so much about man everything from how to record a drum set to uh, producing a song, writing catchy melodies, like
Mhm.
kind of everything in that world of music production. And was just, yeah, so kind to take a high school kid kind of under his wing and spend a lot of time with me and helping me develop. And I think that's where I also was discovering this love for that side
Yeah.
as well. It started as just pure musician, like I just want to play instruments, I just want to play, you know, wherever and whenever. And then this is around the time later in high school when I was like, oh man, I also love this side of the music industry, if you will, and like um, that there's this whole other technique and skill that could get better at.
Yeah. Yeah. Did
Um,
you take more of like a producer role even at that young age as you and your friends were in the studio recording? Did you find yourself on both sides of the board, as it were?
Definitely, yes. Didn't know what I was doing,
Mhm.
but yes, I tried. I wanted to do that. Like I wanted to do that. I wanted to. um, be somebody that could like, write the songs with the band and then execute them
Hmm.
in the studio. And yeah, I mean, that early stuff, when I listen back to it, is just hilarious, and it's locked away in a vault where no one can ever hear it. But again, it's like it's something that was just so weirdly like I need to get better at this.
Hmm.
And so I just would kind of do it, even though I didn't really know what I was doing at the time and was still had so much to learn. And I'm still learning, to be honest. Uh, but yeah, that was coming up through childhood and eventually before going off to college. That was sort of the path for me.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot
Yeah,
of local influences and mentors, which I love. And I think
yeah,
it's so important, especially if you are in the church world and you have students who have an interest in music or you see potential, like encouraging that. I had
yeah.
people come alongside me too when I was in high school, and I was so shy and self conscious, but they saw something in me that they encouraged and they drew out. And it took a chance on me, by putting me on the Team for Youth group and then eventually Sunday, like your story.
Yeah.
So yeah, I cannot stress enough the importance of those local mentors. Who are some of your other musical influences? Like as you listen to music, who did you kind of model your sound after or
Mm.
strive to be like?
My family always jokes with me that I have had more phases than like anybody they know. And really what they mean is like musical phases.
Hmm.
But back in the day, especially in the 2000s, like your musical phase also kind of determined your life, like your personality almost.
Yeah.
What you would wear, who you would hang out with, like a lot of that was tied to music. Maybe it's still that way. I just feel like now everybody kind of listens to everything,
Mhm.
which is, but to answer your question, I just, yeah, early on, it was my mom. My mom is like a Rolodex of information for 80s and rock. So early on, she was, playing me Queen and Van Halen. Van Halen was actually why I wanted to play guitar, which is just so great. Just being older now and knowing a little more about Van Halen, it's just so funny that hearing that eruption guitar solo was what, as a 7 year old was like, I've never heard anything like this. I want to try doing that. And so my mom, would quiz me. Like she would teach me a little bit about all these 80s bands, and then she would quiz me. So if a song would come on the radio, because she always had 80s hits radio playing, and she'd be like, "Okay, who is this?" And then have to be like, oh, this is and then it would be whoever. Um, and she'd be like, "Okay," and like, you know, she would know producers, she would know who wrote the songs, she would know all that stuff.
Mhm.
And that was also part of what kind of grew this fascination in me about like personnel on a record. On one song, there can be so many people involved and so many contributors, and it takes a team a lot of times. And I think that was fascinating to me, just knowing, looking at liner notes on the back of a CD or something and be like, oh, so and so wrote this or produced this, or oh, this is actually a sample of another song, and kind of learning what all that meant. But I think 80s music was big for me. Anything Michael Jackson, uh, to the more rock stuff like Van Halen and kind of everything in between. Um, and then, I started to kind of develop my own musical identity, I guess, as I got older and discovered that I really liked aggressive music at one point. And this was around late middle school, early high school. I just discovered that I really like punk rock and I really like fast, loud, aggressive drums and guitar.
Mhm.
Um, and that dominated my life for many years, to my family's, dismay. Because I would try to play this stuff around the house and in the car, and they would always just be like, "Oh, okay, here we go. Just a phase. It's just a phase." Um, and from there, it kind of took a hard left turn to like I discovered like later in high school, I discovered like what indie music was,
Mm.
and bands that were kind of in the indie music scene at the time, like Phoenix and MGMT and M83, and that kind of started to kind of help maybe broaden my horizons even more with what else maybe is out there. Like I just discovered this is so cool. I've never heard this, so there's got to be other stuff I've never heard, and that then it was just I don't know. It just kind of turned into like I just love listening to all kinds of music and discovering sounds I've never heard before and ways of writing a song that I didn't think was allowed or even possible. And a band like Radiohead was massive for me because their catalog is crazy diverse as far as like songwriting and production styles, and they're constantly breaking rules that shouldn't be allowed on a band as big as they are. And I think just getting exposed to all kinds of music was helpful to me as an artist and as a musician, because I think it helped me like remember that there's always something to learn,
Mm.
and there's always different approaches to music that are not, there is no right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's just different. And you can listen to, like 70s funk that came out of Nigeria and learn so much from that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also listen to In Sync and learn something from that. And that's what I love about music is like there's just this endless well of creativity that everybody's kind of doing things a little bit differently, and that's the beauty of it. So yeah, musical influences, it's hard to really narrow it down, but um, yeah, I think just going back to my mom and what she taught me early on would probably be the biggest for me as far as like getting into that just headspace of learning. Yeah.
Yeah. I love hearing how supportive your parents were, and how it was important for them to expose you to a lot of different genres and just make sure you had a well-rounded variety and just understanding of culture. Um, and how that started at such a young age for you. And just hearing this really innate drive, even from when you were a toddler, essentially, through middle school, through high school. So then you graduate and you decide, I think I want to pursue music as a career, which there's some risk in that. Um,
Yeah.
I'm sure your parents were still supportive, but as you kind of navigated, like, okay, I'm going to go to college and then I want to pursue this professionally and pursue the music industry. What did that look like? Like, what was your game plan? Before we jump back into today's conversation, we just want to say that we're so glad that you're here with us. And today's conversation is sponsored by us, Creative Tides, and by you. This show exists to bring expertise locally, real voices, real insights, and practical wisdom into your local creative context. As a nonprofit, everything that Creative Tides does is made possible by people who believe in that mission. If this podcast has served you, one way that you can support is by going online and making a one-time or recurring donation, or by purchasing something from our merch shop. As a thank you for being with us, we would love to offer you 10% off the merch of your choice. Head to creative-tides.com/merch and use code podcast at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Every contribution helps us to keep hosting conversations, offering resources, and bringing that wisdom closer to home for you. Make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos, resources, or events. And thank you for being part of this work with us. Now let's get back to the conversation.
Didn't have much of a game plan. Didn't I just, outside of a few people I knew from Salem that had done that, like um, Corey and his son Jared, like I didn't know too many other people that had really gone for it, I guess. And it is scary. Uh, it is very intimidating. And my parents were, yeah, so encouraging and said, go for it. But at the same time, we're also like, hey, you should probably maybe also consider college just in case. And that I'm grateful that they said that because I ended up meeting a wife in college and so many lifelong friends. Um, but in that kind of phase of my life, I didn't want to go to college. I was fully content with like touring with my band that I was in high school that made no money. I was totally fine with just let's tour with this band. We won't even have money to eat. We'll probably have to eat crumbs off of a van floor, but who cares? We're doing the thing, you
Mm-hmm.
know. That was really that was my vision at that point because that to me was already like so far above what I could have really dreamt of at that point. So I think going into college definitely helped, gave me some space because I moved up to Seattle and had some space to really consider, okay, like what could this really look like? And going to college, I also met a lot of friends, musicians that became friends that were just way better than me. And uh, I would meet these guys and be like, whoa, like, man, you are so good at drums, guitar, bass, whatever. And it was like this kind of awakening of like, okay, there's still room to grow here.
Mm-hmm.
There's still room to like hone in the craft, so to speak, and to um, keep learning, keep evolving, and kind of just be patient with it. Is I think where I found myself in college was like, all right, let's just take this time to just be around these people that are better than me and jam with them and see what I can learn from them and then in 3-4 years see if what's on the other side of that.
Mm-hmm.
um,
And was your degree
so
in music, what you're studying?
originally yes, originally yes, I ended up just graduating with my associates and kind of graduated early after I saw how much uh, how much debt I was going into at the time,
That's fair.
uh, which I'm glad I ended up doing that. But yeah, I did do a few classes in college that were kind of around recording, music business, like all that, and but I just still found myself like wanting to just be in the room, like doing it. So whether it was recording, playing live somewhere, just jamming, like I just wanted to be doing it. And um, at that point, wasn't necessarily thinking like, okay, how do I turn this into a 10-year like business plan or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. It was more of just like, I know I love this and I want to do this. And right now I'm just enjoying this community of musicians and the spaces I was in that was affording me to, yeah, be around these really good players and just get better. And I think once I graduated around 2014, um, and I should mention this, basically from 16 years old until I was 26, I was leading worship at various churches and spaces and at college, stuff like that. So that had also become something in my life that was fun to me and really cool, and a way to, you know, be around musicians and help be a part of a team. And, there were times where, like in college, for instance, that I wasn't in a band anymore. And that was kind of the band space,
Hmm.
for me to be able to keep playing with musicians and trying ideas and being creative on just even a Sunday team.
Yeah.
And that was something that I think early on, when I was, even when I first started doing it as a teenager, I didn't necessarily want to. It wasn't like the cool thing at the time,
Hmm.
but so grateful that I ended up doing that for so long,
How did that
and
change
still do.
for you? Because if you started at 16, you were still in high school.
Yeah. Like, how did I start to appreciate it?
Yeah,
The Lord, honestly.
good answer.
I don't know. I mean, outside of God's grace, I think I was just so, because again, I was listening to a lot of like aggressive music, and that was the bands I was in, and worship music was like, you know, chill and and like sleepy.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I just think it grew on me, and I discovered worship music that was also creative, that was like, like the Hillsong Uniteds back then, that were really pushing creativity and uh, sounded like nothing else I'd ever heard really come out of the church. Um, Gospel music that my dad or friends were showing me, that I was just like, whoa, like you know, I thought there was like a cap on musicianship. And then I heard gospel
Mm.
music, and I was like, these people are, like the musicianship in gospel music is to this day like the most incredible thing to me. And
Yeah.
so I think just that helped me also to gain more of an appreciation of like, oh, there is like some incredible music coming out of the church. Um, yeah, it's so funny to think back on that time of my life, but ultimately, we get to post college. I'm still leading worship at a church, but around this time, around that 2014 time, is where I meet the guys that had just formed a band called Citizens that was coming out of Seattle,
Mm-hmm.
and became friends with them. Eventually, there was I think there was like a gig where their guitarist couldn't make it, and they reached out to me. It was like, hey, can you fill in for this gig? Yeah, sure. So that was like my first experience kind of, well, actually, it was my first time ever flying for a gig. I
Mm.
think it was in Memphis or something like that. And so I got a taste of like, you know, the level was a little different from touring in a van, with a hardcore punk band. This was like, oh wow, we're flying somewhere, and like, you know, like we're going to play in this other state.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a wild thing for me. And just sort of from there, we had a good experience together, and they asked me if I wanted to, play guitar more often. And so I started touring with them, just kind of as a touring musician.
Mm-hmm.
And through that time, I was also still leading worship at a church, still doing recording and production stuff around Seattle. And I think just doing as much as I could in whatever way to just keep learning, keep, growing. But I'll be honest with you, I was, I mean, I had to work sometimes two different jobs that had nothing to do with music
Hmm.
just so that I could do any sort of music.
Yeah.
Um, Coffee shops, uh, odd jobs here and there. At one point, I worked for the college that I went to, and um, it was a grind. It was really hard to now kind of be out in the world. You're out of college, kind of, on your own now, so to speak,
Yeah.
and I want to do this music thing, but man, not the most lucrative path for me right now. Even though I'm getting to do all these cool things, it's still not at a place where I could, you know, pedal to the metal, just go into music and be able to survive. And
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure I included that because it's music is, especially if you're wanting to go into it full time, like it that is part of what makes it scary
Yeah.
is knowing that there is such a gap between like the massive artists that are out there that everybody knows their name, the household names of even producers, and kind of everybody else.
Yeah.
There is a huge gap in just uh, the finances, I guess, that come from that. And so
Yeah.
I was finding myself being like, okay, maybe I can't ever necessarily go full time, but I love this. I love what I'm doing right now. If I have to do some hours at a coffee shop, like so be it,
Hmm.
because I want it. I still want to do this stuff. And um, fast forward later 20 teens, um, was kind of came to this point in my life where I was part of a church. I was part of a church plant that unfortunately had ended, and there wasn't necessarily anything on the horizon for like jumping right back into another church. I was still playing with citizens, but it was not like a constant thing. It was just sort of when we would tour and stuff like that. And then the production stuff in Seattle was slowing down a bit. I don't know if that's because of just the rise in tech and a
Mm.
lot of creative people leaving or what, but it just became sort of this a little dry in that period of my life where I was starting to be like even more so, I guess, concerned about, okay, where do I go from here? I know that I want to do this and I love this and I have so many people in my corner supporting me, but at the end of the day, you gotta have something to live on, and it was getting really hard. Seattle's obviously really expensive, and um, then we get into 2018, 19, and I meet my wife. She is from Seattle, but she's living in Los Angeles, going to a seminary. So now we're having to decide as we're kind of getting ready to get married, like, okay, are we going to live in LA? Are we going to live in Seattle? That was a whole thing. Then you add going into 2020 with COVID on top of that. We get married right at the beginning of COVID and decide we're gonna do the LA thing. And for me, that was really scary
Mm.
because I'm coming from kind of a place where now I kind of know everybody to an
Yeah.
extent. And Seattle's a lot smaller of a city. And now I'm going down to this place where like I have a couple friends, but really it's just 8 million people that I don't know. And, you know, don't know what to expect. I just figured, hey, Seattle, seems to be maybe it was kind of seeming like my time in Seattle had come to an end and
Hmm.
was willing to try LA. I knew obviously there's a lot of music down there and was like, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
So moved down there during COVID and literally had nothing.
Mm.
for months, and it was challenging, it was frustrating, confusing, scary, all the things. Not to mention there's a pandemic happening, uh, and that really tested my, I guess, belief in whether I could keep doing this or
Mm-hmm.
not, and what that was even going to look like. Um, and the band was on pause at this point because we couldn't tour anymore with
Yeah.
COVID. So really, it was like there was just nothing happening. I couldn't go to sessions. I couldn't go meet people because of all the restrictions, and it was a tough 6 months of being in a new place, and just, I guess, maybe at this point I need to go work at Whole Foods or something, like just do something. And my wife was so encouraging, and she held us down for that time, and worked really hard, um, and was just like, keep pushing, like something's gonna happen. And eventually met Dale Becker, through just a cold email to his studio, one of many that I had sent to producers, engineers, studios all over LA. And he got back to me and said, "Come by the studio, just have a mask. Like, would love to meet you."
Mm-hmm.
That led into him offering me a job as an engineer at his studio, which for me was huge, but also kind of like, oh, okay, mastering. Never done mastering. I've always kind of been in the production side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm willing to give this a try. I feel like some of the skills can transfer over, and we can try this thing for a while. And discovered I loved mastering, which was really cool for me to kind of have this new thing that now I could, not this new thing that I really want to get better at now. And it's kind of this new challenge in this season where it had been so quiet for so long. And there I got to uh, work on some incredible projects, like you mentioned at the top, that otherwise I would not have any access to. Yeah, learned a crazy amount just about the industry, and kind of the next level of working on teams that are putting a lot of time and money and effort into these records that a lot of people are going to listen to.
Yeah.
And got to be there for 2-ish years, and develop as a mastering engineer while still kind of doing production stuff on the side. Eventually Citizens was able to tour again. And after a couple years of being with Dale, I was like, okay, it's been, I've been here in LA for a few years. I want to try just going for it.
Mm-hmm.
And, as terrifying as it was, my wife and I just basically started a business, if you will, just for the studio that I own, and was like, all right, I'm gonna still do production. I'm gonna still do songwriting. I'm also gonna offer mastering, which by that point I had started to get a lot of cool opportunities
Mm-hmm.
with mastering music, and we were like, here we go. Let's go for it. And that was just before the going into the year 2023. And I've been, yeah, doing my thing full time out of my studio ever since. Still playing with Citizens, obviously, and touring, but yeah, here we are, and crazy, but I'm really grateful
Yeah.
for that time in LA, and still there. So
Yeah. I love hearing the years of honing your craft and developing, and then even what it took to get to where you are. Like, it wasn't just this thunder and lightning, like all of a sudden this moment where your life changed. It was still years of outreach and struggle and development. And that was something when we did our episode with Jack Espinosa, who plays with Becoming Bristol. Like they also started, he was a middle schooler and then through high school, and then they just did a bunch of outreach and they continued to develop. And it wasn't this like one day you're nobody and the next day you make it. And I
Yeah.
think that's sort of our perception when we see those big household names. And even,
Yeah.
when I watch like the Grammys and you see all these new artist nominees and you're like, oh, well, I just assumed that they were nobody and then they had a song blow up and now they're somebody. But even someone like, I remember Sabrina Carpenter was nominated for new artist, and
Yeah.
but she had her start on Disney Channel when she was like
Right.
probably middle school, and then she had several albums released before she got to the point where what most people see is espresso or whatever, like the song blow up, but she
Hmm.
had years of development. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I like hearing the backstory of, we live in such a culture where it's like we want the instant results and we're very impatient, and then social media obviously doesn't help because we just see literally the highlight reel for people. And so to
Yeah.
talk with you, to talk with somebody like Jack, who now you can list out this really comprehensive, impressive biography, like with people you've worked for, projects you've worked on, but it's like none of that just happens. Like that takes a lot of struggle, and even so, like I also love hearing along the way you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to jump. I'm just going to try it and take the
Yeah.
risk. And so yeah, it's really, really cool to hear that. What was, as you were working with, I mean, you have worked with Grammy nominated artists, were you working directly with them? Because it does take a lot of people to go into the making of those albums. And
Yeah.
I mean, the run sheet of credits, I mean, even sometimes just the
Massive.
songwriters, it's like a paragraph
Yeah.
of people. So
Right.
what was that experience like as you are probably featured on their album credits, but
Yeah.
the actual
Yeah.
relationship?
That's a good question. I and I'll just answer this, for this is what it was. Like when you're doing mastering, working with you're not meeting the
Mm,
artist usually. Especially during those COVID years. So like I started working with Dale still in the thick of COVID in Los Angeles, and it was a whole different beast down there as far as rules and regulations. So maybe we would have met a few more artists if it wasn't COVID, but even as things kind of lightened up, uh, yeah, just to kind of give a realistic like at that level, there's not a lot of like meet and greet
yeah,
time.
you're not just
Um,
hanging out in the studio.
yeah, which is, that's fine with me. I don't, you know, it's not the end of the world that you don't
Mhm,
get to meet them. It's way cooler just to be a part of a team that is working on that album and to kind of have that space to do our thing. Um, Occasionally there would be artists that came in, like Snoh Aalegra. She came in when we were working on that record, which was cool. But I feel like in the production side of my role or the touring side, that's where I get a lot more kind of interfacing with people and getting to meet people. But it's a nice balance. I enjoy the kind of social side of the touring and the writing and production, and then the kind of recluse, like I'm in a room alone by myself all day if I'm mastering an album.
mhm.
I kind of like having the two. I think it kind of works with my personality. It probably wouldn't work for everybody, but yeah. So it's sort of a you never know really who you're gonna meet and who you're gonna end up being in a room with. But
Yeah.
yeah.
What were some things you learned once you transitioned to LA and working in studios there? Like that's a whole different ball game from Seattle or really anywhere else in the country. I mean, it's like Nashville, it has a strong music scene, but LA is
Hmm.
like the music capital here in the States. Like what surprised you? What things were similar rhythm? Like what was that experience like for you?
Mm. Probably. how I don't know if simple is the right word, but it's less complicated than it seems
Mm.
in a specific way. Like just from the mastering side, let's say, um, I noticed early on in LA that the kind of bigger scope of the project, often the yeah, the like more uh simple it became in a weird way. I'm trying to think of a better word, but it was like we worked on a lot of indie stuff too, and a lot of times the indie stuff was the teams were like heavily involved. There was a lot of emails, there was a lot of notes, there was a lot of like, okay, we need to change this, need to change this, need to change that. And then like, some big record would come in that would was being projected to, maybe get voted for a Grammy or something. And we would send off the masters and it would just be like, great, thanks. And that would be it. And I think that kind of showed me a few things. That one, when you get to a certain level, there's just sort of an expectation that the work is going to be done well.
Mm.
So there doesn't need to be a lot of like, hey, we got to go back and fix this and change this.
Yeah.
And earlier in the production process, like in the writing and production stuff, there is definitely more of that. But even still, I think when you're around, especially people in LA that are, just at this kind of, everybody kind of has an expectation that the people working around them are going to do their job basically
Yeah.
and do it well. So there doesn't have to be that same like, yeah, level of so many things need to change and people are arguing over this or EQ this differently. Like it's just kind of people do their job and it kind of goes down the line. And not to say every project is like that, but I think that was a big thing that stood out to me early, that I was like, oh wow, I expected it to be the opposite. I expected there to be way more like hands-on and just
Mm.
crazy email threads with 1,000 people on it. And sometimes there were, but more often than not, it was just you do your thing, you send back the song, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I I have this perception of the music industry in LA, especially, you're in the secular music industry, which is a different world, I would imagine, than Christian music. Was there, as you were working in those environments, did you feel still like really rooted and strong in your faith, or did you ever have a season of
Mm.
like deconstruction, for lack of a better word, but just like you're kind of experiencing a new world, and did you, I don't know, was it hard to stay rooted in your faith?
Yeah, that's a good question. I still do, obviously, like Citizens, we would still be considered um, Christian music, and I still do dabble in a lot of and work with a lot of Christian artists. But yeah, the LA move and transition was the first time that I was like more exclusively in like the secular world, so to speak. And I don't know, I think for me, like, and this kind of goes back to my parents and my mom like showing me music at a young age. I think I was always just so open to music. Like I didn't really think of it like this is Christian, this is
Mm.
secular, or like this talks about God, this doesn't talk about God. I think I've always seen music in a way that whether or not this artist is singing about God or is religious at all, it's still an expression of God in them.
Mm.
And I think that having that, trying to always have that mindset of like hearing God, who is, we believe to be the ultimate creator, created us. We are the image of God. So this person making music, whether they like it or not,
Mhm.
is tapping into the image of God.
Mhm.
And so being in LA and being around all different kinds of music, some of which you probably shouldn't play around kids, and maybe some people would not love the content of. I think for me, it was never like a weird or scary thing. Because I think I was able to still find the good in it
Mhm.
and appreciate it for what it was, even if it was something that maybe I wouldn't listen to, but like
Yeah.
appreciate the art. And um, so I think it never really challenged my personal faith in God. I think if anything, it helped me see this new side
Mhm.
of God in a bigger way, and more of this just like wonder and curiosity of God, and like probably in some ways like strengthened my faith.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's a good question. I've never really sat down and like processed that,
Yeah.
but that's just kind of what comes off the top of my head.
Yeah. That's a really
Yeah.
beautiful perspective. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
So we talked about how obviously pursuing music as a career can be a risk, and there's a lot of like
Yeah.
grind and struggle even if and when you are successful. So for young artists, whether they're musicians or wanting to pursue being a producer, what advice would you have if they want to pursue this as a career?
Yeah. Man, I know every story is different. Everybody comes from a different situation, different family, different culture, different background. Um, but I would just say find those people, find those people, even if it's just one person
Mm.
that that maybe has some kind of a recording setup, or has just a guitar, or has just a flute, like whatever, find that person or find those people around you that you can learn from,
Mhm.
as early as possible. And, if that's something that you're really intrigued by and interested in at a young age, to be around them to the point where it's probably annoying for that person, just like, just hang around them, watch them do what they do, and learn as much as you can, ask questions. And the more that you are, grow, and if you start to learn an instrument, learn production, learn mixing, mastering, whatever, just be open to the fact that, one, there's going to be probably a million plus people that are better at
Mhm.
you, are better than you at what you're doing, and seeing that as not a discouraging thing, or like, oh man, I'm never going to be good enough,
Mhm.
but appreciation for what you, and seeing it more through the lens of like, oh wow, I can learn from these people.
Yeah.
um, and just, yeah, taking every opportunity to learn, keep learning, keep like, just never stop learning, uh, keep expanding your, what you think is even possible in music, and discovering different genres, and where music is made around the world, and how they do things different. And yeah, hopefully I'm not beating a dead horse at this point. It's just like the learning aspect, I think, is just so critical. At least it was for me.
Yeah.
And I love to just encourage younger people to do, or to try and maybe set down their, what they, you know because as musicians, not to go off on a huge tangent, but as musicians, we can be prideful, and we can have this sense of like, oh yeah, I am pretty good at what I
Yeah.
do. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with confidence, but I think if that confidence turns into like, I've made it, I have nothing else to learn,
Mhm.
or not being willing to learn from somebody maybe that you deem is not as good as you, that's where I think you can start to run into like a plateau. And if that constant evolution and growing and learning it, stops, this, maybe not the best spot to be in if
Mm.
you're wanting to do this for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Similar-ish question, because so much of your roots was and is still tied to the local church. What
Yeah.
advice or encouragement would you have for the local church worship team or tech team?
Yeah, man, kind of the same answer as the first one.
That's fair.
Just, yeah, I've been a part of a lot of those teams over the years, and the teams that were the most fun in my experience were the teams that were continually uh, experimenting, continually pushing each other, um, and encouraging one another, like, hey, you know even something as simple as, heard this really cool album, you should listen to it.
Mm.
Something just as simple as that, and maybe it's something that that person had never really heard before, and you don't know what that could lead their creative imagination to want to do. And or if it's something like, you know uh, raising somebody up on guitar or on drums, they have an interest in that, and they want to learn more about that. um, if you're the person in that position of, this person's looking up to you, then
Mhm.
remembering like that was you at one point,
Yeah.
and treating them the same way that your mentors treated you, or the people you learned from treated you, and being willing to put in those hours and that time, with these people that are wanting to, uh, yeah, basically do what maybe you're doing now.
Mhm.
um, and then that, from that person's perspective, being willing to learn and listen to this person that maybe has some more years of experience than you. And I think it just kind of goes both ways, as far as, yeah, just opening yourself up and kind of having a open-handed posture of like, I know that there's a lot I don't know, and I just want to keep doing this, so however that looks, uh, just being a team in with that kind of posture, I think is really valuable. And
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, nobody loves to be on a team where there is that person that thinks they have arrived,
Yeah.
and no shade on those people. It's just, we've all kind of, we know those people.
Yeah.
And it's, I think just being part of a team where everybody is willing to just accept that there's more out there, there's more to learn, just makes it fun and exciting.
Mhm.
It feels like, at least in my experience, there was a lot less burnout on teams like that than there was. And I know that's a very like maybe triggering word in the church world, of like burning out on especially if it's like volunteer teams and all that.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of the reality of it. But I think being on teams where people have that mindset makes it feel, it's almost like, when people say, you know find a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I
Mhm.
kind of think of it in that same way. Like if you're signing up to be a part of this team, like if it's something that you love to be around, like you're just going to want to be there. You're going to want to be getting better and getting better with your teammates, and discovering ways to do new things and learn this technique. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's good. I have a few fun questions as we wrap up, and I actually forgot to include these in our email thread, so I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Let's do it.
But I always like to ask musicians, and if you want to answer from like a recording side too, what's your rig rundown?
Oh, well, uh, I have a lot of rigs because of the different, like I have like the live musician rig and the studio rig. I do have, shameless plug, a YouTube video. It's actually on Citizen's YouTube
Okay.
where I go through our live rig. Um, and that was for the last tour that we were on fall of last year, which is probably faster than trying to explain it all here. But uh, maybe I'll talk about just like my home studio, if that's all right, and
Yeah.
because it's a little more concise. But yeah, I have my studios just out of me and my wife's home, and I kind of have it set up to where I can either do writing, production, or mastering work. And it all kind of starts from MacBook Pro. I have two. I only have one set of monitors. I have PMC IB1s, and then that goes through a couple different interfaces. Like I have an Apollo to do recording, and a couple different mics, and I just use the Apollo preamps for that. And then I have a Lynx Hilo. This is getting really nerdy. Are you sure you want this?
Yes. Right.
Okay. I have a Lynx Hilo, which is my like actual AD converter, which is converting all the analog to digital and digital to audio or to analog audio that I also use as like my monitor controller on my desk. And then I'm just surrounded by guitars and keyboards, different instruments that I like having available. Um, and then I also designed some acoustic treatment that I made back during COVID, um, and kind of designed it for a room because it's a pretty small room. So I needed a lot of absorption, especially in the lower frequencies.
Mhm.
The monitors that I have are big boys, so they push a lot of air and they push a lot of especially sub and kind of low, mid, and down information. So I needed to kind of build out the room in a way where it could balance some of that out. But yeah, it's fairly simple, and then a lot of that gear comes with me on the road, and
Mm.
I work out of a few other studios in LA too, but definitely like having the setup.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. You don't have to talk me through your whole like board and stuff, but a go-to guitar, a go-to drum kit.
go to guitar just for the sake of it was my first like big boy guitar that I bought in college is a Gretsch Silverjet from 1993, which is the same year I was born, and it has I have this very special connection to it. A wild looking guitar. It's sparkly and silver. It was kind of famously used by Chris Cornell, who is obviously a Seattle grunge legend. So there's also the ties to the Northwest with it, and love how it sounds. I've had it for a long time, and I don't tour with it as much because of how special it is to me, but that's always been my go-to. No matter what other guitars I have, that's usually the first one I pick up. And um, what was the second? Oh, drum kit.
Yeah.
Drum kit's tough because I just love all kinds of drums, but maybe I would just say like an old Ludwig, like a 60s, 70s Ludwig that's just beefy and big. And yeah, those just kind of sound good no
Hmm.
matter what.
It's
Yeah.
classic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have an embarrassing stage moment you would be willing to share?
Yes. Many. Too many. Uh, and I love that. Yeah. There's always mistakes to be made, and it's just it's just part of the thing. But I think the one that sticks out the most is back in 2015, maybe. Citizens and my band called King's Kaleidoscope and John Mark McMillan, we were playing out in Virginia, if I remember right. And we were kind of playing in this big arena auditorium thing. Like it was a pretty good sized show. Maybe 1,500 people, 2,000 people, something like that. And at the time, this is one of the bigger shows I had ever played in my
Mhm.
life. Um, and at one point during the set, well, I should say this: I was borrowing friend's pedal board. It was not my pedal board. I was borrowing it because he also, so his name's Spencer, and he was actually the OG guitar player of Citizens. And so I would borrow his board back in the day because it just kind of made sense because he had all the sounds
Mm.
for every song. So it just made it kind of easier for me to just bring a guitar, bring his board, and he kind of had all those presets. And so I was using his board, and hopefully this doesn't. I'm not trying to make him look bad, but during one of our most like I don't know if intense is the right word, but maybe intimate and like uh, emotive songs in our whole catalog. It's a song called "Oh God." It's very delicate and starts off with just our lead singer Zach, him and his guitar, and one point in the song, I'm supposed to kind of come in with some like light swells and stuff, just for ambience. And something, still to this day, don't know, something went wrong with this pedal board. This is not Spencer's fault. Something went wrong with the pedal board when I was supposed to kind of come in with these ambient swells. And just chaos and almost like a siren started coming out of this pedal board and filling this huge arena. And it sounded like, yeah, it sounded like an alarm was going off. And I could not figure out how to get it to stop. It just kept going. And it felt like eternity, of course.
Yeah.
But I'm pressing every pedal, I'm slamming things. I'm just like, what is happening? And I finally get it to stop. And, of course, when you get it to stop and then it goes back to being quiet because we're in this quiet song, you just hear it reverberating. You're hearing your mistake reverberate off of the walls. And Zach just kind of stops and looks over at me and he's like, how you doing there, man? You doing all right? And I was just mortified, of course. And, it ended up being like a lighthearted thing. And it's something that we still tell as a band to this day. We still tell that story of the mystery siren that came out of Spencer's pedal board. But that one was a doozy for sure. That was a real humbling, like, yeah, this can happen. This can happen at any time. Sometimes equipment just goes bonkers and everybody looks at you and is like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? So yeah, that one is usually the first on my list to tell.
That's a good one. That's a good
Yeah.
one. Well, if people want to learn more about you, your music, your work, where are some websites or social media pages they can go to?
Yeah. Website is just connorhedge.com. All of my socials, I think, are just at Connor Hedge. So pretty simple. Yeah. Also feel free to email me at hello@connorhedge.com. Um, yeah.
Cool. Great. Yeah, we'll be sure to link those pages and also your video with citizens of your rig rundown if people are interested in that one. So
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's been so great talking with you and hearing your story. Thank
Ah,
you for
likewise.
sharing and taking the time. So
Thanks so much for having me on. This was a lot of fun. And yeah, I really appreciate the questions and just kind of, it's not every day you kind of go through your life in a way like this. So I appreciate you kind of making space for that. And yeah, I love what you guys are doing here with Creative Tides.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the Creative Tides podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow us on social media so you don't miss any upcoming videos, resources, or events. If you'd like to support Creative Tides, including events like workshops or tools like this podcast, head to our website, creative-tides.com, to make a donation or purchase merch. Thanks so much for being a part.